Are you interested in getting into film photography? I've got the perfect little camera for you that can get you started in 35mm film photography. This little camera here, the Olympus Trip 35. Stick around and I'll tell you all about it. So this little camera began its manufacturing run in about 1968 and went right through till about 1984. And reports say that they built somewhere in the region of about 5 million of these. So it's a very popular, very easy, simple to use camera. So this is the Olympus Trip 35. It comes with a Zuiko f2.8 40mm lens, and you can see around the outside here that it's actually got a selenium light meter, which means it'll actually calculate the light, the shutter speed and the aperture for you if you have it in auto mode. Now this camera was very popular in its day, and hence the reason it's called the Trip. It was designed for and intended for people to use when they were going on holiday, and they could just use it just as a point and shoot camera. And it was that popular that they actually ran an ad campaign which featured David Bailey promoting this camera in a number of different ads, and I've got one to show you right now.
That's very nice, thank you. I can't smile, everybody please, smile! Waste of time, if you haven't taken a light, really.
That's all right. This Olympus is completely automatic. It works out the light, and you just click the shutter.
Oh, it's okay for snaps, but just you try and enlarge them. You see, the trouble with these small cameras is the lens.
No problem. There's a Seiko lens. They use it on the Olympus OM1, one of the best cameras in the world.
Well, I suppose they're all right for you boys, but you wouldn't get a professional using one.
Do you know who that is?
Who?
David Bailey.
David Bailey? Who's he?
The Olympus Trip. So simple, anyone can use it.
So there you go, an interesting little ad, and there's a number of those that featured a number of celebrities as well promoting this particular camera, which really gave an indication as to how popular this camera became, certainly in the late 70s. So as I say, very simple camera to use. I'll go through the controls in a little bit more detail when I'm back at my bench, but just to give you an idea now, the front control dial actually has a number of different settings. It enables you on the front ring here to actually select your ISO all the way from 25 up to 400. I've actually got this set to 400 now because in this particular camera I've got an Ilford HP5 Plus black and white film, which is very good. I've already run a couple of rolls of HP5 through this, so very good. Very simple focusing zone on this. There's 4 focus zones on the dial here, which give you 4 very simple symbols. One is actually just the picture of body from this way up. Then it's got a setting for half height. Then there's full bodies there, which is a very good setting if you're into shooting street photography. That's you can basically just put it into that setting and just set and forget, which makes it very easy to use. And then lastly, there's a little symbol of a mountain, which really just indicates that that's a setting for landscape type photography. In terms of some of the other features on the camera, pretty much standard. On the bottom it's got a standard tripod mount and a little button here to release the film when you're finished shooting. You just push that little button in and you use the film rewind spool here to rewind the film. It does have a flash mount with a hot shoe mount on there, and you'll see on the front here it's actually got the little adapter for your flash cable as well. I've just got a little protector here which I've slipped into that, which I robbed off of one of my other cameras, I think. You'll also see on the top here there's a serial number and also the shutter button, which does have a cable release if you want to use that as well. So on the aperture dial on here, there is actually a number of settings. You can actually adjust the aperture in manual mode all the way from f2.8 wide open up to f22. Now if you use the manual aperture settings, what the camera will do is it will choose one of 2 shutter speeds, either 1/40th or 1/200th of a second. You pretty much know that you're going to get a shot. The exposure might be slightly out, but the camera will do its best to give you the best exposure. However, if you put it into the auto mode, it will select the shutter speed and the aperture automatically based on the light reading from the selenium light meter that's on the front of the camera. All in all, a very simple camera, very easy to use and very easy to take standard shots. Now this camera does have a very interesting feature on it, which I'll show you in a little bit more detail when we get it back on the bench. But through the actual viewfinder here, there's a couple of guides on there which help you frame your shot. But when you're in the auto mode here, and that's when the red A is lined up with the red line, if you have an incorrect exposure, the camera won't allow you to take the photos. So in actual fact, what happens is there's a little red flag that pops up in the viewfinder that also prevents you from actually pushing the shutter button. So that's a handy little feature if you haven't got the correct exposure. And that's actually functional in this camera as well, and I'll show you how that operates when we get it back on the bench. You'll see on the top here there's your standard film counter. Now I've already loaded a film in this and I'll show you how to do that, and the film counter there will actually go all the way up to 36. This one's sitting at 1 because I'm going to take some shots with this right now. So I've actually got this on the setting which is the little mountain in orange on the dial on the front here, which essentially means I have an infinity focus, so I can actually start to take some landscape shots with this, and I'm going to take a couple now. There we go. Now the rewind on this is fairly straightforward. There's just a little film advance wind button just here. You just basically wind that on until you get to your next shot, and you can see there it's on number 2, ready to go. So there you go, very simple camera, very easy to use, and I'm very pleased with how this one came out. So let's have a look at this camera. So I've owned this camera now for about a year. I bought this online via eBay, I think it was, from someone who lived in Victoria, in Melbourne, and really didn't know what I was getting. I think I paid $100 for it, and I actually had to go and get someone to go and pick it up for me because there were some issues with postage. But anyway, when it came, I was quite pleased with its condition. After a good clean up, it came up pretty well, so I'm quite pleased with that. So if you have a look inside, I'm not sure why there's a Fujifilm sticker on here, obviously some film that someone's used at some point. It is actually an Olympus. So you can see inside that it's actually in very good condition. So I'm very pleased with how this one turned out. It's almost like it's been kept in a box or in a case the whole time it's been owned, so which was pretty good. So let's have a little look at this. So on the front we have a non-interchangeable lens on it. It's a Zuiko f2.8 40mm lens, which are supposedly a very good lens, and in actual fact they actually compare these with the Olympus OM1, which I just so happen to have one of those here as well in terms of sharpness. But very good lens, and around the outside here you can see what's called a selenium light meter. This one is still functional, which is good, and basically what that means is that this will expose correctly for you, particularly if you're in auto. And if you're in auto and there's not enough light, it will actually throw up a little flag in the viewfinder here, a little red flag, and will actually prevent you from taking a photo. So in order to see whether your light meter works, which I know this one does, if you put your aperture ring into auto, that's lining up the red A with the red line here, put it in auto, your light meter will give you the right exposure. Now, because I've got the lens cap on here, that's essentially saying to the light meter that there's not enough light. And because I'm in auto, if you look in the viewfinder there, when I try and take a photo, I get a little red flag that pops up. And that's also preventing me from firing the shutter as well. So I'm happy to say that that's still functional on this particular camera. And just to prove myself here, I will just take that off, and it allows me to take the photo. Yeah, so I'm quite pleased that that works. On the front here, you have the choice of auto, or from f2.8 all the way up to f22, and flash sync speeds will work with all of those settings on there if you do have a flash. There's your flash port there as well, and hot shoe mount there. What you will see on here is that the shutter release button on here is actually a metal shutter release button, which indicates that this camera was actually produced before 1976, and I happen to know that this one was actually made in 1972. But after 1976, the shutter button here was a black plastic button, so you might see a lot of those if you see other photos of these. So yeah, so that's an interesting little fact there. And if you wanted to know the year of your camera that it was manufactured, I'm not going to take this off now, but on the film pressure plate here, if you were to take that off, on the back of the film pressure plate, there are some stamped marks, and that will give you the year and the month of manufacture with the last number of each. So that's quite interesting. So I found out that this one was manufactured in 1972. Okay, so moving on to the top, we've got our film rewind spool, pretty standard. This particular rewind spool doesn't release the rear door like it does on some cameras. The release is actually this little latch that will actually release the door. So there you can see. And we have the film counter here, and obviously the serial number of the camera as well. And the strap lugs as well on here. On the bottom we have the standard 1/4 inch tripod mount, and also the film release button here for when you want to rewind your film. Now I did actually put a skylight filter on mine, which is a Skylight 1B, which is a bit of an odd size thread. You'll see here it's actually 43.5 millimeters. Fortunately I was able to get hold of one of those, and you can see here tightening that up, it's turning the film speed dial on here, but I'll put that back to 400 because I'm going to actually show you how to load the Ilford HP5 into this camera. So let's load the film into this little Olympus Trip 35. We just need to lift, I can push that from here, but we would lift up the film rewind spool and lay the film in there and just push that back down, pull out enough film here like so. Always fiddly when you're doing it on camera, and then we just wind that on till it takes up. Literally that's all we do. Now I'm going to wind it forward to take a few. 1, 2, 3, and there we are, ready at number 1 on the film counter. So we're ready to go. So there we are. I can't take the back off of this one now. So I have a film there ready to go on this, the Olympus Trip 35. Now one other thing to note with this camera is, in actual fact, when you do set your focus zones on the front here with those 4 settings that I showed you earlier, it will actually give you on the other side of the ring there, the actual distance in feet and meters. So as you can see here, I'm set to the mountain, which was the, I guess the landscape shooting setting, that it will actually show you on the back here. I'm not sure if you can see that on there, but that's actually set to infinity now. And the same goes for most of these settings here. So if I go back to what I would term as sort of the portrait type setting there, that actually lines up with the 3 feet or 1 meter setting, somewhere in the region of about 3 or 4 feet and 1 meter. Similarly for the half body shots, that's lining up with 1.5 meters and about 6 feet. With the full body shots, that's actually lining up with the 3 meter setting and roughly about 12 feet. Lastly, as I said before, we go to infinity when we go to the landscape shot. So very handy little dial, very easy to understand. Well, if you enjoyed that little video about this, the Olympus Trip 35, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also let me know if you'd like to see any other videos. I've got quite a number of retro vintage film cameras. I'm happy to show you through those. Please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll show you some more at another time. Thanks very much for joining me.